Welcome to the Art of Growth and to the Driven to Drawn panel series. We are going through all 9 types and talking to a panel of them about what it's like when they're in a driven state versus a drawn state. And we'll be getting into what that means. But for today, we have the Type 9 panel. For some of you, as we go through this series, you might recognize that you are living more in a driven state. You're being driven by your type, and you want to experience more of the drawn of invitation. And if that is you and you are interested in exploring coaching with us, you can set up a free 15-minute exploration call to see if we would be a good fit to coach you through this process. You can reach out to us at theartofgrowth.org if you are interested in coaching. Also go there to sign up for our newsletter so you keep up to date with new things as they are happening. But for now, let's jump into our Type 9 panel in the Driven to Drawn series.
All right, well, welcome, Type 9s. I am so excited to have you here with us. We are doing this another bit of research here to figure out what it looks like for each type when it comes to being driven by the type versus drawn. And this is a particular interest to me because the Type 9 panel is the one that tended to have a very varied response to this question. And I'm eager to get into that. So but before we begin, I would love for you to introduce yourself. Tell us a little bit about you.
I'm Luke. I'm 25 and I live in Asheville, North Carolina.
And I'm Shayna. I am 35 and I live in Grand Rapids, Michigan. I'm a mom and I am married.
I'm Anne. I'm 39 from Minneapolis, Minnesota. I'm married with 3 daughters.
And I'm Bryce. I'm an artist living in Boulder, Colorado.
Great. Well, good to meet each of you. And we are super excited about this topic because this keeps coming up. It keeps coming up over and over again in our conversations with folks. What is driven? What is drawn? What parts do we feel like we're going through life in that sort of unconscious state where our type is driving us? And what does it produce? What are we feeling internally? And what are we doing externally, right? So they're both of those aspects are at play. And then there are moments where we feel drawn, and that looks different too. And so we're describing the drawn a little bit differently. And for many Type 9s, I had this reaction of like, so is drawn like the good thing? Because to me, sometimes I feel like I'm drawn into my imagination and away from doing things that I should be doing. And I see some head nodding here. So we had to kind of shape the language around that to describe the drive as not what happens when you're finally like moving towards your true priorities, but what happens when your personality is just doing its thing to avoid, right? So it's the driven to avoid something. So I'd love to hear from you as we begin. What do you feel and what do you do when you are driven?
I would say being driven for me is a lot about being driven to avoid feelings, to just maintain an inner sense of calm. I feel overwhelmed very easily. So it's about trying to get out of that in whatever way possible, following the path of least resistance, sort of a sense of fatalism that I don't have much control of my life, that things are just kind of happening to me. And it's just, I'm more being carried, which sounds more like being drawn, but it's more like I'm driven to let myself just be carried along by life.
So much in what you just said there. Yeah, Shayna.
That resonates. When I first got into the Enneagram, I really, the sleepwalking metaphor was huge for me. Like when I'm driven, it's like I'm sleepwalking through life, going, like you said, path of least resistance. Some of the points I wrote is like, I feel like my personality is kind of like this unfair boss. Like I have no say in my life. I just am so driven to avoid things and avoiding the feeling of overwhelm or feeling at all that your life kind of takes over and you have no choice because you're so driven to avoid just basically life at all.
So you're driven away from choice.
You feel like you have no choice. Like you have to pick the one that's going to have the least effect on you, because you don't feel like you have the capacity to just live everyday life.
Or the least effect on other people. Sometimes it's actually easier to take all of the negative things upon yourself so that nobody else has to deal with negative things.
Yes.
Does that feel like a have to as well sometimes?
Yeah. I even feel like I can handle negative things better than other people. So it's almost, I should take it because I can handle it better, and other people get overwhelmed.
Mm.
I agree wholeheartedly with that. You know, I'm like, oh, I can absorb stuff. I can deal with it. I've always been given the supposedly positive feedback that I'm always cool and calm and collected. And I'm like, yeah, that's me. And then I realized later down the road, maybe I was just like stuffing it because I feel like I'm just naturally good at that. So I'll like overwhelm the system with like absorbing negative stuff that maybe isn't even mine to take on. So that's been something that I've been working on as well. I totally resonate with that point.
How does that help you with the comfort piece?
Oh, I feel like I'm exhausted all the time because it's not comfortable, but I'm really good at acting like it's fine. I just pretend like it's fine. So I have to avoid things that are going to be too much on the outside. And then I do take on things that aren't mine to own because I want to help other people feel comfortable. That's really important to me. So then I'm kind of like have this boundary on the inside too of like, I don't process the emotions. And that was really good how Anne said, you overwhelm the system because you just stuff everything. And then every once in a while, your passive aggressiveness comes out and you think that you're being so calm and nice and kind, but everybody around really knows that you're not happy, but you're just not saying it.
I think the other aspect of comfort too is wanting to maintain, like nines are reaction managers. We want to make sure that nobody is reacting negatively to us. So if we take something on, they can't blame us for anything. We can't take on the like responsibility for something. It's like, as long as they don't think negatively of us because we didn't do something bad or didn't take something on that we should have, that's more comfortable for us.
Mm-hmm.
It's interesting. So it's more comfortable in the moment to do this. So my personality is driven to avoid this like discomfort externally, but then over time it starts to build up and becomes it becomes very uncomfortable after a while.
Yeah.
And I'd never heard that term, we are reaction managers, before, but I think that's a really helpful term, Luke, that I think a lot of nines would resonate with. We got to hear from Bryce here.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm just noting the difference in energy of like there's a quickness among some of you. Like, so for me, I'm just noticing already in my own ninishness of what it's like to be here in this panel, and the ease of kind of slipping back into the watcher or the receiver of what is happening, what you're saying as I'm listening to it. So like going into the automatic quiet space. But for me, the driven, it's kind of like there's a momentum either sliding down into the less health, or I'm revving up towards the good and more awake. So here in the going more to sleep, it's like it's an energetic feeling for me of like being on a riverbank, like a sandy riverbank, and the sand is just sliding into the water. It's just the river is eroding it, and I'm trying to stay up, and I start backing up, and there is overwhelm, there's an anxiety, there's a whole lot of feeling and emotion for me, and that feels like I'm going to drown. So I continue to dissociate from the intensity of my experience in order to be okay. And in a way, I lived so many years of my life in that state. And I think the key factor for me is that I didn't really know how asleep I was.
Yeah.
Just in hearing some of you speak, there's like such an acute awareness of like the reaction management, and I don't feel that really. It's more like the impulse to press things down, and it happens without choice. It's just
Well, you're describing the driven, because I think driven, this is one of the key things that helps people is driven's unconscious. Like if you think you're like, I'm supposed to be, I'm driven to accomplish something I really don't want to do, then it's not in the drivenness of the type, right? What you're describing there as you fall asleep. Yes, totally. That's exactly how the drivenness functions. It's like unaware. But you're describing it as that's what happens to you. It sounds like when you're in that driven space.
I do really relate to what Bryce said about kind of pulling back and staying in the periphery. Particularly, I'm a social repressed 9. That's my least used instinct. And I can, in a lot of social situations, I find myself trying to blend in, stay closer to a wall, stay away from groups of people, and kind of be by myself, because it's, for me, that's where I pull back the most, is when I'm in groups of people or around people that I don't know very well. So I feel that sense of being driven to pull back and not be seen.
That's helpful. I would like to hear from the rest of you how that shows up for you in what context.
I'm a social 9. So for a long time, I never quite understood why I was so different at work than I am kind of at home and around my family and people that I know better, because I talk a lot sometimes in social situations, and I never quite understood that. And I always leave thinking that I talked too much. And people always give me the feedback of, I don't think that you talk that much at all. So I tend to move towards people because my social instinct is dominant. And that's hard. It's hard. It feels so counter who I am sometimes. Like it leaves me kind of internally conflicted, because my 9 is like, stop talking, you're talking too much. But in social situations, I actually move towards people.
Mm.
Yeah, I'm a 1-to-1 9, and I find that I can get just really wrapped up in conversations with people, especially like, just 1-to-1 literally. And I'm very cognizant of the energy that it takes to be in those situations. And also I know that I'm going to need to recover after that. And so when I hear the word driven, to me, I think energy, like how much energy am I going to have for this particular thing? And so it's scary to me a little bit, because I'm like, okay, I'm driven to do this in the moment, but how am I going to be able to maintain that? Like, will I be able to keep this going? Or is it going to be like this project that I got really enthused about for a moment in time, and then it fizzles out? So I love when I get in the zone of feeling driven, and kind of going to that healthy side where you kind of become a 3 for a moment in time. But I've had to evaluate, okay, like, is this something that I want to take on because I'm driven today, but will I be tomorrow?
A lot of times that resonates so much with me, because I'm driven as a social 9 to belong to groups, whether they're groups that I want to be a part of at all or not. So when I'm more drawn on the good side, I can pause and evaluate, wait, is this something that I really want to do? Or is this just me trying to belong? Because my personality is like driving me to just belong, no matter if it's something I even really want to belong to in the first place.
I'm just going to out myself and say I'm already going through oh man, I'm speaking too much. For me, as a sexual 9, I have 2 teenage kids, and I have my partner, and so the 4 of us are living together. And the primary way that this whole mechanism kind of locks in and the gears start going is my awareness of the energetic state of each of them. And I can be, when I'm with one of them, then there's this ease of being of like, it's just one person. I feel their energy. I match them in a way, and then we have this great experience. But when we're all in the same space, it becomes, I do start managing, I guess that is a good word, of like, I'm reading this person, and then I make myself into this in-between node between all the people, and I'm trying to mitigate the damage or just like make everything as easy as possible in the relationship between these people who I care so deeply about. And in that way, there's a loss of my own self I actually lose track of myself while I'm tracking the others so intensely. And it can lead to, I mean, this gets to the turn, but it can lead to such a debilitating like feeling of having no power. And that wakes up the first stirrings for me of anger.
Mm. Wow.
Yes to all of that.
Yeah. What was really good is I could go there with you and feel it. So thank you. That's it's important to say. Could you, each of you, give an example, maybe a practical example, like a story, something recently that happened where you saw yourself being driven, where you saw that situation of being caught, like Bryce said, maybe between two people, or found yourself kind of like trying to neutralize, merge, pull the dials down on things around you.
So going back to the instincts a bit, I'm a self-preservation 9. And when I was thinking back to what time in my life I felt like the least healthy and how is that driven by my personality, there was a time when I just had extreme cognitive dissonance between an addiction that I was struggling with and my faith, because they were very much in conflict. And being driven was a lot. It was driving me deeper and deeper into addiction to not be able to open up to anybody. And it was also the addictive quality was in a lot of different areas. So it could be with TV, food, sleep. It was a lot about seeking out any sort of physical or like sensory escape from dealing with feelings. So it was really, I think the self-preservation is all about trying to numb out for a 9, about to not have any difficult feelings, to just be neutral. And it feels like having no feelings is like the only way to survive, to really just get by, just kind of almost just survive, but not really live engaged.
Mm. That's interesting too, because the way you describe the self-preservation seeking, I mean, self-preservation instinct naturally seeks comfort anyways, regardless of which type it is, tends to seek more of that sort of comfort, safety, security, that kind of thing. And so, so the comfort piece, which is 9s are described as seeking either peace, relational peace, or comfort, that really sounds like it pushes you into the comfort, the physical comfort aspect, as a way to numb out. So yeah, okay. Thank you.
Something that I do that I think a few other panelists have kind of touched on is everybody's kind of making references to like, we like to live in the middle. I don't like high highs. I don't like low lows. And I don't like people around me to get incredibly excited or incredibly despondent, because I don't know. I a lot of times have this guilt piece of like, we seem so nice and kind, like we just are so easy to get along with, and we're so empathetic and caring, but it's almost like this self-serving, like I'm learning a lot about codependence these days. And it's like, if my people are okay, I'm okay. So what I do with my kids is I don't want them to get super excited or super sad. So I do this managing of their emotions. So my daughter and I just this past weekend went on this girls' getaway trip with some friends. And she was getting so excited about it. And that was overwhelming me. I was like, we're going, cool. We're going to have fun. It's going to be great. Let's not talk about it. Like, and I just kind of caught myself. I'm like, no, she's excited. I'm going to get excited with her. And it's this energy management, I think, is what drives it. Like, I don't feel like I have the capacity, and I'm going to need so much alone time to recharge to be able to make it through the day, that those high highs and low lows take too much out of me, that I have to manage them, and I have to manage them in the people around me. Otherwise, I'm just going to be overtaken. So that's something that I'm working on really hard, is to allow people to have high highs and low lows, because that's part of life.
When you did with your daughter, what was the effect of it for you? Did it physically wear you out completely and you felt like you had to recharge the batteries afterwards?
Yeah, we went, it was just a one night trip, and Sunday I did a lot of laying around. I do. I do need alone time to recharge. So it does. It's not like this made up thing. Like it really does take a lot out of me. And I don't know why that is. And I don't know if that'll ever be different, but the energy thing for a 9, for me anyways, is so real. Like I do have to protect my energy a little bit. Otherwise I'm flat on the floor.
Yeah. Yeah.
For me, I want to begin with the energy thing, that when I am deep inside of my personality and sliding down in health, there is such a heaviness. There's such a tiredness for me. But when I'm moving in the other direction, there is a tremendous amount of energy here, and also, and it might be partly the instinct, the sexual instinct, but there's a love of intensity that I have. So for me, when I go into the places that are really hard, it's not so much about the amount of energy, it's about the quality of it, and that quality is tension. So there's a way for me to be very awake, very alive, very invigorated and vital. And then there's also a way of like that, if that energy starts to feel tense, and that's primarily, as you were saying, Shayna, like a codependent sort of thing. If you're okay, then I'm okay. But if the moment that there's something not okay happening in you, I experience it in my body, in my being, as tension. So the example I'd give is just if my partner and my kids are in the same room, and recently my partner was having a challenging time with something that was happening in relationship with my kids, and that tension just revved up so high in me that I felt like I was about to just black out or just fall out the back of me. Like I did not know how to stay present in the amount of tension that was happening.
I appreciate that description, because I think that's helpful to a lot of us to hear how sensitive you as a 9, and perhaps a lot of 9s are, to that negative energy, that tension, that conflict, whereas some other people don't like conflict, but it's not to that degree. So I appreciate you sharing that.
I will admit that in this current moment today, I feel like I'm at the point where I need to go into rest mode for like days or weeks. Like I've been on overdrive for the last few weeks with, vacation, but with 3 kids, under 7. And I've got a lot of work stuff. I have my own public relations company. So I've got that. And then just, I think the stress of going into the holidays is like kind of sending me into almost like a physical overdrive. And then I had one conflict happen this week, and it is physically eating me up, like, because I'm not able to like pacify it and fix it and be, good enough to fix it. It makes me feel like not myself. And so I'm just craving that rest and that reset to happen. And I know it will, but yes, it's definitely an energy ebb and flow of very high highs and sometimes very low lows.
Well, let's move to what it's like for you to be drawn. Describe to me what you feel and what's happening. What are you doing when you're in your drawn state? And maybe give an example of what that, something maybe recent even, where you felt drawn, and what's happening for you.
Well, I can say, but I first want to describe why it would shift modes. And there's one primary reason for me, that in the last couple of years I've been more oriented towards the drawn than ever in my life, which is in my relationship with a woman who is a 4. So she's oriented towards authenticity, of being, of expression, of speaking. And in that, she's turned towards me and been like, yo, dude, what are you doing? You're like, you're not telling the truth. You're falling asleep. You're not bringing like guidance to your kids. You're afraid of conflict. And it just built and built and built until I turned to her and I literally growled and yelled, get off my back. And I mean, with expletives and huge volume. And that was the beginning of me finding strength where I never knew it existed. I had no idea it was in me, to that force and that power. Yeah. I just want to speak to that as the mechanism. And there's something in that too that I just want to say, that my father was an 8. And so I had a childhood of what it's like of the damage that anger can do potentially. Like he would get fired every 1 to 2 years because of his anger, and we'd have to move towns. And there's something in me like, I'm just never going to do that. I'm never going to do that. But with someone coming in and putting that pressure on me in my relationship, that was the real breakthrough for me, of like, leave me alone. It was the breakthrough of my own anger coming out and my own weakness.
What was the result of that? Like, how do you feel different now as a result of that?
Well, first it was a shock because she loves it. My partner loves it. She's like, yes, like, yeah, bring that. So I thought that would be the end of everything. That if oh my God, as I'm feeling that anger in me, realizing that I have it, if I ever let it out, it'll be the end of all relationship. It'll be the end of all things good. It'll be like just a blaze over the fields, and everything will be scorched, and there will be nothing left, including myself. So what I'm finding is it's such an aliveness. It's such a realness of being here. Like, I'm actually here now. I'm actually awake. And it feels really good. I feel really good.
It's awesome. Thank you.
I don't know if everyone's had that experience, but I've had a similar one where kind of a life circumstance, you can't manage everything anymore. And so you're kind of forced to face your own anger. And I think that was kind of the awakening for me too, was like, I can pretend. And then once I chose to wake up, because in my mid-30s, I don't know who I am. I'm sleepwalking through life. Like, it's like, you feel, I felt a lot of shame. Like, I don't even know who I am. I don't even know what I like. Like, I'm so focused on others and managing things that I don't even know who I am. And I didn't want to live like that anymore. So you wake up to your anger, and then you're terrified that you're going to burn everyone to the ground because you have these decades of like slights that you just swept under a rug. So that part was really scary for me. I was terrified of my anger. I thought I was going to destroy every relationship I had. And that's, for a 9, that's like death for me. Like, if I don't have somewhere where I belong, like, belonging is incredibly, and I don't know if that's a social 9 thing, but belonging is a word that resonates with me a lot. So just waking up, being able to kind of decipher being angry is different than being assertive. And once I could find my assertiveness and just be able to have a voice that wasn't like an angry voice that was going to hurt people, and then I could have boundaries, then I could show up as myself and not feel like I had to take on everyone else's stuff. I had a boundary there where I ended and other people started. That's when I could start feeling alive and like a person and moving more towards drawn, because I could look inside to myself rather than finding myself through the eyes of other people.
Yes. And conflict, like teaching how to deal with conflict, that's been like the biggest growth area for me, because as soon as I realized, I dove into like what it means to be a 9, I realized that I had zero conflict skills. And so I had to start small and, like, okay, how do you write an email that might be offensive? How do you walk into conflict with, a sibling that you don't want to necessarily have? And I was always jealous of seeing other people in my orbit be able to have conflict seemingly so easily. Like, yeah, we just had this fight and we moved on and we didn't die and our relationship is still intact. And I honestly didn't think that it would be possible for me to do. So it took a lot of like little steps and little, practicing. And now I'm not a pro at conflict by any means, but I'm not like deathly scared of it. And I've actually seen personal growth through conflict. And so I'm like reaching out to all the nines in my life to be like, oh my gosh, I want to be like a conflict counselor, even though, like I said, not a pro. But I think that's really like step one of being able to be drawn. And then, having that criteria of like, okay, is this something that's I'm being drawn into because it's for me? Is this good for me? Am I just going along with somebody's agenda? But that has opened up a whole new world to me. So I'm a huge, huge proponent of just like do the conflict.
I think for me, it's been a lot about engaging the internal conflict, similar like how I was talking about earlier, having a lot of, kind of cognitive dissonance and inner conflicts in my own life, trying to hold things more lightly and trying to see that like engaging my feelings is not going to be the end of the world. It's less about conflict with other people and more about conflict within myself. And like looking at parts of myself that I don't like and seeing that that I can engage it and work on it, and it's going to be okay. Seeing that vulnerability is not going to be the end of the world. I remember I was involved in a college ministry when I was in college, and there was somebody who was kind of assigned to be my sort of mentor. And he called me out one day and said that I was not opening up to him. I was holding things back. I was being deceptive. And I basically told him like, well, you're not getting anything out of me. Like, I'm not going to tell you. It's secret. It's only mine. So vulnerability has been a huge growing edge for me of being able to admit things to myself and other people and realize that it's not going to be overwhelming. So just breathing and just having a lighter energy about things has been huge for me.
Two things that I want to highlight in what's been said is one is managing the internal conflict for you, Luke, is a really important piece for all types of all kinds. Is the work that we do with acceptance of the self actually helps us to then be more accepting of others. And it is the fullness of that acceptance of the self is always a work in progress, right? It takes forever to get there. But that part of it is actually what makes us feel the greatest sense of belonging, is we're belonging to ourselves first, making peace with ourselves, being okay with who we are. And I love the stuff about being the difference that Anne, you made between assertiveness and conflict. I think it's really good. I love that. It's helping people to move more towards like, you can as a 9 be assertive. You can say things and you can do it in a very 9 way where it's not, it's not the explosion and it's effective. I'd love for all of us to talk about, give me an example of what it looks like for you when you're drawn. So, maybe something more towards, when I'm drawn, I'm moving in this way. I'm feeling this. And what we've talked about so far is like the movement away from the sort of burying things and in avoidance to now, shifting to something more like tuning back into yourself. Is there sort of an energy that you become aware of that you're like, whoa, this is risky. Wow, this is intense. And I'm going to want to pull back on it, that can feel drawn to you? It's like, oh, this is the drawn. Oh boy, there's like a pump the brakes here. So maybe talk about that and maybe an example of what that looks like for you.
But where you still feel like you are at your best. Like as Joel was just saying that, I just popped in my head. I got an email from a type 9 today who talked about like this journey from silencing his own voice for years and then actually admitting to himself, that was the first step. Like, oh, this is really where I am. Oh, this is how I really feel. like the capacity to admit it to himself first, and then now to be able to externalize that a bit more and to see that journey. I was like, oh, that is fascinating. That is the journey for the nines. Like, this is, you were drawn towards this place, like as you do, you feel more and more like your best self. So I'd love to hear like some of your experiences with that.
I want to state just like this energetic difference between feeling not that I don't belong or even matter, but feeling that I don't even exist. It's like I shared this with you, Joel, of like, it's like taking my hand and turning it towards myself and combing through myself, and I can't find anything here. Like, there's nothing here. So that's the slide down again, but the slide or the opening into the good, into the drawn, is this feeling not there's such a solidity of being, and it's the magnitude of it, because I don't just feel like I'm here in my body and now I'm strong and I'm here and I'm powerful. I actually feel it goes so far beyond the size of my own body that I feel mountainous. I literally do. Like, it's not even a metaphor. There's such a hugeness that I feel in my being. And then as I meet the rest of the world, there's both a strength and a gentleness. And maybe one example of how this has shown up is with my daughter, who just turned 14. And we were working a difference, and usually I wouldn't even work the difference. I would just passively oblige to whatever it is that she's wanting. And if I didn't agree, then I'd go quiet and passive aggressively resist it in some backhanded way later. But instead, I chose to step up and meet her in it and claim what I'm feeling, what I'm seeing. And she was really upset. Like, she totally just shut down to me. And I left her room. And the next morning, I was still carrying that inside of me. And she comes down the stairs and she's like bright and sunny. And I'm like, oh my God, I can't believe that there's a resilience in other types and other people that I just assume that they're going to carry this for days, like me. I'm just, man, I feel so bad. That was just such an awful episode we just had. So there's a waking up in me of the power of actually meeting other people in the truth of what my experience is, what their experience is, and that we can grow something more real and beautiful, rather than putting everything into a sleep and just hoping that it's going to go away. So
I think something we've all said in one version or another is that being drawn means saying that our presence matters, not any more than others, but certainly not any less than others. And so for me, investing in myself and making my opinions at least equal to other people's. So I've been going back to school, which is something that I didn't think I would do for a long time. I did the Art of Growth group coaching, which is something that I didn't think that I should spend money on because I was a little too like self-centered. So just realizing that I can invest in myself and make my presence matter.
Love that.
Oh, that's awesome. Yeah.
Ray said something about being seen too, which I thought back to high school was a long time ago, but I actually didn't think in high school that anyone like would notice me, like I did a lot of things, but I wasn't like that one standout in any one place. And so I was like, oh, there's no way people actually like recognize me or like, would remember me years later. And people continuously come up to me and they're like, oh yeah, I remembered, this specific thing about you. And it always has shocked me because I always thought that I flew under the radar, that I wasn't that significant maybe, that other people were maybe more significant than I was. And so that has like helped me to come into myself too. And I get very drawn when I feel seen. So I immediately notice that I want to do XYZ when I feel seen. So, I had like a client tell me recently, like they pointed out something very specific about my skill set that I didn't even think about. Like I could never have written this or told this story in the way that you did. Thank you for taking what's in our brains and putting it on paper and telling it so well. And I'm like, whoa, thank you for saying that. And it makes me, that to me makes me drawn. And I'm like, I will do whatever you ask me to do from this point out because, thank you. So that's a place where I get really drawn is when I just receive any sort of like recognition.
Mm.
I resonate with that, but that's hard for me too. It's like I want people to see me because I need that external feedback that my presence does matter because I don't believe it inside. But then it's almost like it makes me uncomfortable too to get that feedback. So that's something I'm still working on. But at my best, I think we all kind of set a version of like, we understand that we matter and that like a word that comes to mind is impact. Like I was put on this earth, I was created, I have a purpose. And if I don't say the things that I'm here to say, I'm not going to have the impact on the people around me that I was meant to have. And as a 9, it's weird. Like I don't, in unhealth, I don't believe that I even have a purpose or could possibly impact other people. But then when I get these glimpses of like, when I do say what I need to say, like people give me positive feedback and like people appreciate the things that I say. And it's always a shock to me. Like, and I hope I can get to a place in my life where it's not, but when I get that feedback, I'm like, you like that, you liked that, like that meant something to you. It's so hard to believe, but when you get those little glimpses, you're like, okay, I liked that. I want to keep doing that. I want to move towards that.
Do you feel, Shayna, like you said you want to get to a place, but rather than it be an on-off switch, I'm just curious, like every time you get a glimpse, do you feel like something is slowly changing inside you of like, yeah, I know that I'm good, or is it really dependent on them, on the other?
Yeah, I would like to say that it's not. I'm not to that place yet. I don't know. I think that when I'm more drawn rather than driven by my personality, I can almost like detach from like who I am as a 9 and I can just be. And then I feel like you've said beautifully, like that embodied feeling, like I get glimpses of like feeling in my body and feeling like my feet are on the ground. But then it feels really fleeting still. So I haven't figured out how to bring that myself, but I know that I have it in me. I just haven't figured it out yet.
I think related to what Shayna just said, it's being able to take risks, whether it's in saying something or doing something. And even though a lot of times we do get positive feedback when we show up, there's, for me, trying to like be less attached to the outcome and doing something regardless of whether it's going to be received positively or negatively. So just kind of seeing that there's a bigger purpose than just somebody responding positively or negatively to me, that whether, if I have something that is correct to say or do that I know is right, that whatever happens afterwards is out of my hands, that I was supposed to do this, I was supposed to say this, and then that's the only part that I have to do. I don't have to do anything else.
That's really good, Luke.
Yeah.
That takes a lot. That takes a lot for a lot of us to get to, because that outcome-based thinking, it's like, well, what's that going to cause? Who's going to respond in what way? And so, yeah.
Well, and Luke, that's like letting go of being like the managers of everyone's feelings and emotions. So maybe you're onto something. That's the key to finding it in ourselves rather than having to look for it outside of ourselves.
For sure.
Hmm.
I think there's also something about, I remember hearing a teaching that nines as being the top of the Enneagram, we see the way that everything is interconnected. We can see a bigger picture that's maybe harder for other people to see. And so I kind of think about that as well in regards to not needing outcomes, because whether it's something we say or whether it's a life circumstance like losing a job or a death or something, there's a way that bad things can have positive outcomes in ways that we don't see, or even just have effects on other things that we don't see. So I think that's another aspect for me of being drawn, is not seeing a bad thing happening as the end of the world, because I don't always know the full picture. But I believe that there is a bigger picture and that there is a greater good.
So let's round the corner and talk about, how do you begin to convert? We've already started there, and I think this has been rich, particularly the interaction between you folks. Maybe talk about how are you learning to convert that sort of driven, now you're more aware, or you're becoming more aware of the driven so you can see it, and you're becoming more aware of the drawn so you can see that. So how do you move from one to the other? What are some tools that you're using, that you're developing to do that?
Yeah, for me, the core of it all is my body. It's practices of, like, whether it's weight training or getting out on the basketball court, or yoga practice, which is where I was right before I came here. But there's a physicality to it. And I know that I can go into my mind endlessly thinking, spinning, getting so lost in my capacity to perspective take. And then the whole emotional world in me, there are oceans in myself, and I can drown forever in those oceans. But the one place that calls me into being here and being awake with such clarity is through my body. And there are different ways to do that, like I mentioned, but another one, just on my car ride back from yoga practice, was putting on an artist, a musician who, he's not a 9 and he's so passionate, and he has such an ease with intensity and anger and love through anger. And so I'll put that on, and then I'll sing with him. And I it's one way for me of finding my own power through my body, through the raw, real immediacy of here. And there's one other thing I can share. It's not just anger that is waking me up, but it's also desire. And my desire for my partner is just such a huge awakening agent for me as well. Not just like, get off my back, but also, oh my God, I love you. And so waking up this morning and then waking her up by making love to her, like knowing that door is open, that she opened that door to me. And so here I am in the morning, and she's still asleep, and I know what I want. And my whole life is like, no, I'm not going to do anything with this. And so I never did. But to trust myself and then love her into waking up in the morning, and her later saying, like, that was really hot. That was really hot. And it's such an affirmation of, like, yeah, not only do I matter, but my desires matter. My life matters.
Yes.
That's beautiful.
Yes, that is beautiful. Yes. Yes. And that's so good. That's so good. Desire matters. Yeah. Yeah.
Okay, I'm going to be piling on. I can't even talk after Bryce, but I was completely going to echo the physicality. To me, everything is physical. Even like knowing to say yes or no to things, I feel it in my body before I give an answer. So I know that if I'm feeling any tension, like I'm carrying weight on my shoulders, that I need to just go, I need to say no, and it's fine. Like that is my self-care, is being able to read those signals and move forward. And I think connected to that is just being able to cleanse myself of this, like getting the energy stuck in my body by working it out. And so, that's the thing, like I haven't had time to just like do my regular workouts in the last couple of weeks, and I can feel it. I can feel that everything's stuck in my gut right now. And so I really need to get it out, because whether it's anger or any kind of negative emotion, it gets stuck in there. And if I don't move, then it is going to just keep growing and growing. So I've started to learn that more and more about myself, that if I'm ever just feeling in a huge rut, I need to move myself. And then, it's just, I think nines, even though we looked so mild on the surface, I feel like we were just so intense and fiery in all of these internal ways. And so I'm just like, where can I find places to put that? Like when I'm feeling this, like I will get this, intense attractions to like things in my life that I'm like, I want to be part of that. I want to know that person. I want to be part of the conversation. Like, I think that's really exciting to understand. Like, I want to go there and open up and feel intense and be intense and use intense language. Like, let me do that. And so that's been really, really great. Instead of just being like, I'm going to be the status quo, not say anything, and just let people have their own moments. Like I'm kind of done just letting everyone else around me have their moments. Like I want to support everyone in my life, but I also just want to find those places where I can follow my attraction to just life, and let it flow. So again, work in progress.
Amen, sister.
I like it.
That's so good.
You can also hear the sexual instinct of
oh yeah. You could definitely tell the instincts. I was thinking the same. It's
Yes, I want that instinct.
Oh no, it's beautiful. All of the instincts, absolutely beautiful. And you can see, and that's the reason why too, yes, there's growth for all of you, right? But then you can also see where, that's the instinct helping to move this piece along, or that's the instinct that holds back on that piece. And so it's a mix of all of it.
Because the thing that comes up in me when they talk about like wanting that connection and that like desire and passion as a social nine, the word that comes up to me is I want to find my significance. Like I want to find my impact on the world. And that's kind of what my desire is targeted towards. Yeah.
And I like that you're at least starting to move towards the big question, the tough question for nines to answer. This is why I don't lead with this question is, what do you think your light is to shine in the world? Because that's extremely difficult for a lot of nines to tune into. And yet it's there, right? So at your drawn side, you're moving towards, I can say something. And not only does it not have a disastrous effect, but if I'm bringing my full self to it, it seems like it has, dare I say, as a nine, a positive impact on others. It's actually good, right? So as Bryce, you were describing that, yes, it actually is good. And there's a certain way that you do it as a nine that's going to be different than all the other types. But there's a light that's yours to shine. And so, deeply appreciate this so much. And I would love to hear, this is a question I didn't send in advance. So this is kind of like, but you're dealing with a 7, so there's a lot of spontaneity happening in the brain. How could your friends, family, people that you trust, how could they help you? What would be some ways that they can help you in moving more towards your John? And that question came to me because I think one of you mentioned something that made me think of that. Like, when I'm seen, right? Was it you, Anne? I think when you said that, when I'm seen, it makes me want to move out of. So I thought, that's juicy. Let's hear more about that. Like, what are the ways that you're helped as a 9 in moving more towards your drawn state?
I think for me, the thing is, like Anne said, like people can draw it out of you when they, like, I gravitate towards 2s. I have a lot of friends that are 2s because they make me feel seen. And if anybody can say things that make me feel seen, then I'm like, that helps me to believe that I am important and that I do belong. And I want to move towards that. So just any little thing that people would say that would make me feel seen or significant, or like my presence here made a difference. And if I didn't show up, it would matter. Things like that really help me want to chase towards that. And then on the flip side of it, when I do start speaking up and naming my preferences, and I'm no longer the person in the group or the equation that just goes along to get along, sometimes people don't like that. And sometimes that's hard because you get this negative feedback. But I just have to know that I've conditioned people to see me one way. So there is going to be kind of this rubbing up against once I do start kind of owning my own presence and agency.
Yes. Well, you've just given something good for a lot of nines to hear. And that is initially, yes, that's always the change around because of how you've conditioned people, as you said. And so there is moving into the drawn state will cause some of these disruptions. And so that's part of what happens.
I would say one thing that came to mind is allowing me to express a different opinion than the other person without them trying to then change my mind or want to like continue to debate about it. Like if I'm just sharing my opinion with you, that does not automatically mean that I'm trying to start something. It's just, let's both express our opinions and both accept the other person's opinion, and not, if it's something that needs to have a healthy debate at some point, that's fine, but not everything has to be, we don't always have to be aligned in everything. I can have my own person and express my own self.
Yeah, but Luke, what if you're wrong about that? That's excellent. Thank you. That is such a good nugget, because I can see that in a lot of nines I know, where it's like measuring. If I say something, what's your response going to be? And if you're going to argue with me, I'm out. I'm not even going to start. So
yeah, I'm always like thinking 2 steps ahead about everything that I say. So
that's cool. That's cool, Luke. And do you find that do you ever set the context with people so that they know that setup, or do you just hope for it to happen? Or
it very much depends. There's definitely people in my life that I know are a bit more reactive and always want to. It's almost impossible for them to not respond to something I say if they disagree. It's like I have a father who's a 5 who likes to debate very intellectually, and I have a sister who's a 6 who's very reactive. And like I say something, and she's like, "Well, I didn't know you thought that way. Well, I think this way." And she wants us to be on the same page. It's like a lack of loyalty or something like that, because we think different. So it definitely depends. There's people that I trust more, that I can express myself around. There's people that it's like, let me just dip my toe in the water and see if it's hot, or like we'll see how far I can go.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Well, Bryce, you bring that up because there's probably something related to that where you do kind of create maybe some context, or you express like what you're looking for in response from.
Yeah. There's it's only in my primary relationship that I do this, but now I'm like, why don't I do this everywhere? Which is, we create a container so that whoever has the charge is like, I'll be like, I need a container. And so I know that in that space, I can say anything and everything. And until I say, I'm done, thank you, then there will be no response, no verbal response. And it allows me to just move everything with all the charge that I have. And yeah, it's the thought of asking, of requesting that with someone else is like my dad or my mom. So interesting. I've never had a conversation that even begins to go into that territory with either of them. And part of it is because of the trepidation or the assumption that as soon as I have half a thing out of my mouth, there's going to be a response to it that I will then close down in, of like, oh yeah, how could I have said that? I'm so sorry. But if I have the freedom and container to move everything, then it always ends in a more just here, real place. And I'll say one other thing that has been helpful for me just across the board. I'm in a men's group of 13 years, and I still can go a whole night without saying a word. And so what I've found in that context and in many others is just someone asking me a question. Like that can be all it takes for me to then take this whole big world that's happening. And I don't remember who said it, but how much we can have inside of us, just the complexity, the intensity, the depth of, like, there's a self here, even in a 9.
Yeah.
And the quietness for me is more like a locking down mechanism. And it just, one question lobbed over a wall can unlock the whole thing for me. And then I feel like I'm a human too. I'm in this with everyone else rather than being so far back.
Yeah, that's a very practical suggestion. I mean, this is something that for those of us who are hearing it, how about a question and then space and time, particularly for those of us who feel like we need to fill the air constantly, because if there's any gap or any space, it's, oh no, anxiety kicks in and I've got to fill that space. And I like the word container. So there's like, I both ask a question, I give space for the response, and rather than like going back at you, I give you the fullness of that time, and and without debate in that time, during that time frame. So I like that. Makes sense to me.
Yeah, checking in on 9s is key. I mean, this sounds sad, but it's not meant to sound sad. It's just like even small check-ins and questions, like Bryce was mentioning, are so helpful, because I think sometimes that feeling of just being insignificant and also not looking for attention, it's not going to have us be like, hey, I need something. I need somebody to care, but we're feeling it. And I've started doing that for my friends who are 9s in my lives, because I see them kind of just not want to talk about themselves or share feelings. And so now I'm more intentional about being like, I'll be like, did that make you mad? Tell me how mad that made you. And getting it out of them. And so, but I need it for myself too. So I love sometimes when people are like, hey, how was your day? Or how are you feeling? I get weirdly emotional because I'm like, thank you for caring. So little gestures go a long way.
Very cool. Well, thank you. Thank you to each of you. This has been so rich and beautiful and meaningful, and I think helpful to so many of us who love 9s and want to serve 9s better. And this is also meaningful to many out there who are 9s who are wondering about that whole concept of driven versus drawn. And so thank you for sharing your life and your story and what was real to you. And so with that, my friends, grace and peace.
So thank you so much for joining us. You can reach out to us if you're interested in coaching at theartofgrowth.org. Follow us on Instagram at justartofgrowth. And if you leave a review for the show, it really helps people find it. It helps us out a lot. So if you've been listening for a few seasons and you haven't done that yet, please do that. Come on. What are you waiting for? Let's go. Come on. All right. For now, my friends, may you return to yourself to listen to the internal voice. May you ask your body today, what does it need? Will you ask your heart what it wants to say? Will you ask your mind to return from all the places it wanders out to, that you may know yourself again and find your feet on solid ground? Grace and growth, my friends.